Good morning, computer animation students. This is the second part to the Lighthouse landscape example. So what I'm going to be showing you today is how we can take the landscape we built last time, and we're going to add to it a lighthouse and some light and finish this scene. So let me just share my screen with you here so you can and see what we're doing here. So you can see here in Blender that this is what we finished up with last day. So basically we have created our landscape. We've saved it as landscape here. And now what I would like to do, I'm just going to escape out of this, is basically I'm going to just create a new file now. So I've already got my landscape made, and I'm going to click on File New, and I'm going to make a new file. Now I just want to make sure that you're aware that I don't need to create a new file. I could have absolutely created this lighthouse I'm going to show you right now in the same file as a landscape, but I want to do this so that you can see how you can take an existing object that you've made in what particular assignment, let's say, and be able to bring it in, or what we call append it into what you're doing right now. So this is why we're creating this with a new file. But like always, when we create a new file, we want to click on File, Save As. We want to go to our H drive, into our computer animation folder, and into my assignments. And for lack of a better name, I'm just going to call this Lighthouse. And I'm going to make the lighthouse from this. So at this point here, after I've created a new file, the next step is always that I'm going to go into orthographic view by pressing 5 on the numpad. And then in this case, I'm going to go into top view, and I'm going to delete out the cube, and I'm going to replace it with a circle. So I'm going to add mesh circle. So now that I have a circle here, what I want to do is I actually want to go into front view. And what you can see in front view is that a circle and a plane both are two-dimensional objects that have no depth to it. But I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this, and I'm also going to hold down the shift key and then push the scroll wheel button so I can scroll my screen down a bit. So at this point here, while I have it looking like this, I'm going to click on Edit, change to edit mode. And what I'm going to see is down here, I have a circle, and you can sort of see what the circle looks like with all the vertices selected. I'm going to go back into front view though. And now what I would like to do is I would like to try and take this circle and make it into a lighthouse. So the way I'm going to do this, I need to E in edit mode, press E to extrude, and I'm going to go up. But notice I can kind of go all over the place here. I want to make sure this is straight. So I press the letter Z on the keyboard and go up. Notice it now locks it into place. So I'm going to go up to about here, click with the left button of my mouse, and then I'm going to press the letter S. S stands for scale, and this enables me to taper this in a little bit, because obviously when we have a high structure, we can't have the top being wider or the same width as the bottom. Otherwise, it's not very stable. So basically here, what I've done is I've created the sort of the start of this lighthouse. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and shift scroll wheel down to get this so that it's towards the bottom. Now what I'm going to do now is I press E to extrude, and I'm going to press S as well. So E and S, and then this enables me to then widen out my circle a bit. So what I have now is I've got a bit of a wider circle. This is going to constitute, I'm going to go back to front view, my pathway. So I'm going to then, after I've clicked with the left button of my mouse after doing the ES, I can then press E again, and I'm just going to go up a little bit, and I'll press Z to lock into place. So this is going to be kind of like the walkway of my lighthouse. Now, once I've got that where I want it, I can click with the left button of my mouse again to lock that into place. Then I'm going to press ES again. And now this is the tricky part. I need to make sure that when I bring this back in, it starts basically where the other one was finishing. So right about there looks good. So I'm going to click with the left button of my mouse, and then I'm going to E and extrude up, and Z to lock into place. And I'm going to go up about this height, and I'm going to S after I've clicked it with the left button of my mouse to taper it in a bit. So click with the left button of your mouse, then press S to scale in, taper it in a little bit. And then I'm going to click with the left button of my mouse again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press ES again. And this time I'm going to go out wider, even wider than the walkway. So about to here. So once again, we have something that looks like this. And I'm going to click with the left button of my mouse to lock that into place. And then I'm going to press E to extrude up, Z to lock into place, and I'm going to go up to about here. Now, what I'm actually creating here is the roof. So I want a peaked roof here. So I'm going to now press, after I've clicked the left button of my mouse to lock this into place, I'm going to scale this in so that it almost comes to touching. Now, in order to actually get it to touch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on W on the keyboard, and I'm going to choose Merge, and then at center. And that will actually join this all together. So I now have something that looks like this. So this is my basic lighthouse. Now, what I would like to do here is I would like to actually create some openings because this is kind of where the light, this area here is where the light is going to shine out of. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go and in edit mode, I'm going to click on this option here. This is the face selection. So normally in vertice selection, but I'm going to choose face selection. So what this enables us to do is select individual faces of the object. So I want to select 3 faces of the object, and I'm going to shift right click so I can select those 3 faces, and I'm going to just press the delete key, and I'm going to delete out those faces. Now it may not look like anything's happened, but if I scroll around, you can see clearly I've actually deleted out those 3 faces. Now I'm going to leave a beam here, a support beam. So I'm going to click just to the right of that support beam and select 3 more faces and delete out those faces, and then keep doing this around the whole ring roll. So we're going to have 32 vertices here. So I'm going to need to do this 8 times. So what this will do is this will give me an opening by which my light, in theory, could shine out of. Now we could also have made a glass instead, which is what you would normally see in a lighthouse. But for sake of simplicity here, we're just going to delete out these faces right now. So once again, shift right clicking on these 3 faces, pressing the delete key on the keyboard, then selecting faces. So shift right click on these 3 faces, delete faces, and just one more time. And now we've got our sort of lighthouse made. Now, obviously our lighthouse doesn't really look like a lighthouse yet because it's all gray. So what I need to do now is I need to go into top view. I need to go into top view in edit mode, and I need to select the top so I can separate this from the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the C for circle selection, C for circle selection. I'm going to circle select this out a little bit so that it gets outside of the dots, and then click with the left button of my mouse. If I press escape to the circle selection and just scroll over, I can see what I've got here, which is the top part only. And so this way now I can separate this by pressing P, which stands for partition, to separate this selection. So now if I go into object mode, what I should see now is I have 2 separate objects. I have my circle and I'm in circle 001. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to just rename this. So instead of circle, I'm going to call this roof, and I'll call this the base. So roof and base. And so let's say now I want to have a metal sort of roof and sort of like a rock sort of wallish sort of looking lighthouse base. So what I need to do is I need to go into the internet. So I'm just going to share my screen there for the internet. And in here, we already have sort of the internet app. I'm in the Google Images. So I could look for seamless metal, or even say copper, possibly copper roof texture, and see what pops up. So when we get there, we might like maybe the look of this. We might like this kind of look. So I could right click on here, choose save image as, and I could call this the roof. And then likewise, I'm going to maybe put a seamless rock wall, and sort of use this as the texture for the lighthouse. So I could call this rock face, something like that. And so I've saved those 2. So now what I can do is I can go back into Blender. So if I go back into Blender here, what I can do now is in object mode, I can, while I have, let's say, my base selected, I can go firstly over into materials. and click new, and I'll call this the rock base. And I'm just going to create a color. So it doesn't really matter what the color is, but I'll give it a material, because we always have to have a material before I have a texture. Then I can, oh, and while I'm at it, I may as well change my specularity down to 0, my intensity for my specularity down to 0. And I'm going to go to texture now, click new, make sure that image or movie is on, give this the name of rock base. And I'm going to go to open here, go to my H drive, go to my computer animation folder, into my textures folder, and I'm going to find that rock face here. So I'm going to click on both. Now this is a little bit different. This object we have is not a flat plane. This is more like a cylinder. So I'm going to sort of keep this cylindrical look here and see what it looks like in a minute. But I'm going to have to go down here, and one of the things I need to make sure is that the coordinates is set as generated, not UV. So it needs to be generated. But I also want to play around with the projection. So maybe I'm going to try a 2 projection instead and see what this looks like. So it's starting to look a little better. Now, if I were to get my camera set up over here, so if I look at my camera, I might need to pull this back a little bit. So I'll just G and grab and pull back a little bit so I can get more of my lighthouse in this picture. And I'm just going to go to top view and make sure that my light is right in between the camera and the thing here. And then I can press the F12 key to see what this looks like. So clearly we have rock here, but what we can see is that the rock is way too big, way too big. So I'm going to press escape to get out of render. I'm going to go and I'm going to select my base again. And in here under size, I'm going to make this probably about a 6 even. So I'm going to make this quite small by making this about a 6. And then I can render again and see what this looks like. So now you can see we have this, and it might actually have been a little bit too extreme. I could maybe have gone down to about a 4. We'll see what that looks like and render again. So this is looking pretty good now. So we have sort of a rock looking base for our lighthouse. Now I'm going to press escape and I'm going to go to the roof now. And so the same thing, I need to add a material first. So I'll call this my roof. And once again, it doesn't really matter what I put for a color. I'll just sort of choose, I don't know, a sort of a reddish looking color for it. But then I'm going to go to textures and I'm going to scroll up so I can see the new option here. And I'll call this roof. And once again, change to image or movie. And then go to open. And I'm going to go to my H drive, into my computer animation folder, into my textures folder, and choose the roof texture. So I'm going to click both here. Once again, keep it as a sort of spherical, but down here, make sure that the coordinates are set as generated, and then make this as a 2. And then we'll press the F12 key to see what this looks like. So now this is what we can see our roof is looking like. It looks not bad, but I could maybe like set the size as about a 2, just to see whether that will look any better. And once again, it's partially just trial and error, but that's looking pretty good now. So this is basically our lighthouse created. Now, one of the things that we need to note is that I've separated this, but I would probably want to join this again at some point. So I can join it right now. The way we join once again is we select one object, then we shift right click on the other object. So they need to both be selected. And then we, in object mode, Control J to join them. So what I can double check is just make sure that it's still looking good in render. So now I have finished my lighthouse. So I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure I save this. So I'm going to click File, Save, and I'm going to save my lighthouse. Now, once again, I've created this in a different file than my landscape. So what I need to do now is I need to go back and open up my landscape file, which I think I called landscape here. And so this is my landscape. Once again, just looking at it, this is what it's looking like right now. So I'm going to escape out of here. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to append my lighthouse into this scene. And the way we do this is we click on File, and it's not through Open, it's through the word Append. So down here, File, Append, but it looks very much like when we're opening. So we're going to go to the H drive, into my computer animation folder, in my science folder, and I'm going to find my lighthouse file that I have already saved it in. So I'm going to click on Lighthouse here. But now in here, there's a whole bunch of objects that are going on, a whole bunch of things in my file. But I need to go to Object, the Object folder. And in here, notice that the one file I have is called Circle, Circle 001. So I want to insert this circle. So I want to select this object, and I'm going to click on Link, Append from Library. And what we see now is that this object has been put into my landscape. Now what I need to do is I'm going to go into top view, and while I have this selected, I'm going to move this over to sort of this area. And so this is looking pretty good from a top view. Now I need to go from a front view and make sure that in fact it's sort of the right position. And what I'm seeing is that my lighthouse really honestly is too big for my landscape. So I'm going to probably scale this. So S.5 to make it about half the size it is right now. So I'm just going to double check to see that this looks good in relation to position and in top view where it's located and even side view. So it's looking pretty good. So now if I were to do a render of this, and I'm just going to go and grab my camera and just pull back a little bit so I can get a little bit more view of this. And while I have it selected, just sort of G and select. And so now if I did a F12 on this, what I see is I have my scene, but I also then have my lighthouse in my scene. So the last few things we need to do to kind of finish this up is we need to make our actual sort of environment look a little bit more stormy and dark. And the other thing we need to add is a light. So let's take a look at how we do those two things. So the first thing is looking at how to make something look sort of dark and stormy. So over here on the tools, the fourth tool in is something called the world. So if I click on this, this is why we have sort of dark gray background always here. But what I can do is I can go down here and I can change this so that we have something called mist as well. So mist is an interesting option that will kind of create, as the name would suggest, a mist or sort of a cloudy look to the scene. And the way this is really controlled is by the depth. So essentially by changing this depth, the bigger the number, the less mist, the lower the number, more mist. So if I look at what this mist looks like right now, if I do an F12 on this, this is what my mist is giving me. And it actually looks pretty good, but I'm going to change this down maybe to about a 20 instead for my depth. And then I'm going to see what it looks like now. So you can see that when I lower that number, it creates even more mist. And this is actually looking pretty good. Kind of looks like a bit of a stormy night here with a bit of like cloud cover. So this is looking pretty good. But once again, depending on your scene, you may have to adjust this depth number anywhere down to maybe even 15 or up to 30 to make it look good. So I'm going to press escape on this. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a light. So I'm going to go into top view here, and I'm going to click on my cursor so that it's positioned right at the top and right in this middle of this lighthouse. And then I'm going to go into front view, and I'm just going to make sure that my cursor is positioned sort of right in the middle of my lighthouse. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add, but I'm not going to add a mesh. I'm going to add a lamp. And the lamp I want to add is something called a spot lamp. So when I create this spot lamp, notice that it creates this lamp that has a light sort of shining out of it. And one of the things I need to do is while I'm in front view, I can R to rotate this in object mode. I can just pull it up a little bit. Now, the other thing I want to do is I need to, while I have this lamp selected, I need to go over into what's called the object data. It should look kind of like a light bulb here. And in here, I can change some of the settings. So one of the things I want to change is I need to go down. I need to change the size of this from a 45-degree angle to probably about a 15-degree angle. Okay, so that's a much narrower light. And the other thing that we need to do is I need to add a halo, because if I don't click on this option, I'm not actually going to see a light shining through. So I need to click on this as well, and now I will see a halo. Now, the last thing I need to do here is I need to go and I need to, in top view, rotate this around so that it shines into the water instead of just randomly over somewhere else. So now if I have this, what I can do is I can F12 and see what this is sort of looking like. So what I see is I have clearly a light that's shining into the water now. I might want to change the angle a little bit. But the other issue I have is I have no sort of light source. Like this light is sort of emanating from the lighthouse without any sort of glowing source for it. So we're going to have to create that as well. So first off, I'm just going to angle this a little more here. But then the next step is this. And this is a bit tricky. So I will kind of explain exactly what I'm doing here. But I'm just going to go over here in sort of an open area here. And I'm going to add a simple plane. So I'm going to go add mesh plane. And the reason why I'm adding a plane is because it's the most simplistic object we have. So now I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to click on an individual vertice. And I'm going to delete out that vertice, and I'm going to delete out another vertice, and I'm going to delete out the third vertice. So all I have left is this one little vertice. So this is the one vertice I have, and now I'm going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to make sure that I name this right away as my light source, because it's a little dot that I'm easily going to lose otherwise. Now, what I want to do is, this is the dot here. So basically I need to bring this dot down and position it so that it's nice and right in the middle sort of my lighthouse. And in front view, it should be basically right up here. So what I want to do is, while I have this light source selected, I'm going to go to materials now, and I'm going to click on new, and I'll call this, for lack of a better name, light source. And what I have over here is, yes, we can add colors and so forth with materials, but there's other options. And one of them is a halo. So a halo, as you can see, looks like it's kind of glowing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that glowing halo, and I'm going to add some rings and some star tips to this. And so when I do an F12 now with my light source in here, what I should see is, I should see an actual light that's sort of the source by which this light is coming out. Now, a couple things we can do as well, just so you know, is we can change the color of the light. So I could change this light source to sort of a more yellowish look. And I can also then select my light as well, and I could go into object data here, and I could give this light a little bit less of a white look and more of a yellowish look. And so then if I do an F12, I'm going to see sort of a yellowish color as opposed to a white color. So that's basically our lighthouse landscape assignment all done. I would obviously click on File Save to just finish it up. And that's what I would need to see from you in order to hand this in. The one thing I will mention is this. What I don't want to see when you show me your render is this. I want to make sure that your camera is such that it doesn't look like it's just floating in space. And I'll show you what I mean by this. If I were to pull my camera back a little bit further and have this really wide, and then possibly pull this like this and have it looking like this, what this ends up looking like when I F12 this is basically I'm seeing way too much of this. And in fact, I would have to go with my camera here, and I'd have to actually change the clipping here to end this further even, because it can't even handle how far back I pulled it right now. But basically, what I'm going to see is, first of all, the mist is all messed up because I pulled it back further, but also I'm sort of looking like my area is floating in space. So once again, what we want to have here is we want to have our camera situated in such a way that I can get a good clear view of the lighthouse, of the light shining in there, but also make it so that it doesn't look like it's just the land is floating in space. So once again, I want to have this camera such as about like this, so that when I F12 this, I'm going to see the lighthouse, I'm going to see the land, but it doesn't just look like the water is just sort of randomly hanging out in space. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, once again, please don't hesitate to ask.